The morning sun was already burning hot when Tom rode out to check the fence line on the far side of the ranch. His horse moved slowly through the dusty trail, and beside them his loyal dog Rex trotted along with his tongue hanging out. Rex was a smart border collie who had been Tom's companion for 5 years now. The dog knew the ranch better than most people knew their own backyards. Tom had been working at the Silver Creek Ranch for almost 10 years. He was 32 years old, quiet by nature, and preferred the company of animals over people most days. The ranch was his home, and the wide open spaces gave him the peace he needed. He had grown up in the city, but after his parents died in a car accident, he had come out here looking for something different. What he found was a life that suited him perfectly. The fence repair work was routine. Check for broken posts, fix loose wire, make sure the cattle couldn't wander off onto the highway. It was honest work that kept his hands busy and his mind clear. Rex always came along on these rides, sometimes chasing rabbits or barking at hawks, but mostly just enjoying the adventure. They were about 3 miles from the main ranch house when Rex suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked up and he started whining in a way Tom had never heard before. The dog's whole body was tense, like he was listening to something far away. "What is it, boy?" Tom asked, pulling his horse to a stop. Rex looked up at him with worried eyes, then took off running toward a cluster of rocks about half a mile away. The dog was moving fast, faster than Tom had ever seen him run. Something was wrong. Rex never acted like this unless there was real trouble. Tom urged his horse into a gallop and followed the dog. The rocks were scattered around like giant marbles, creating shadows and hiding spots in the desert landscape. As they got closer, Tom could hear Rex barking urgently, the kind of bark that meant, "Come here now, this is important." When Tom rounded the largest rock, he saw what had gotten Rex so upset. A young woman was lying in the dirt, curled up in a small ball. Her long brown hair was tangled and full of dust. She was wearing a white button-down shirt that was torn and dirty, jeans that looked expensive, and leather boots that definitely weren't made for walking in the desert. Tom jumped off his horse and knelt beside her. She was breathing, but barely. Her lips were cracked and dry, her skin was flushed red from the sun, and when he touched her forehead, it was burning hot. She had been out here for hours, maybe longer. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said gently, but she didn't respond. Rex whimpered and licked the woman's hand, as if trying to wake her up. Tom grabbed his water bottle from his saddlebag and carefully lifted the woman's head. He poured a small amount of water on her lips and watched as she instinctively tried to swallow. That was a good sign. It meant she wasn't completely unconscious. "Come on, wake up," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." After a few more drops of water, her eyelids fluttered. She tried to say something, but only a small croaking sound came out. Tom gave her a little more water, being careful not to give her too much too fast. "Easy now," he said. Small sips. Her eyes opened slowly. They were green, the color of spring grass, and filled with confusion and fear. She looked at Tom like she didn't know where she was or how she had gotten there. She tried to sit up, but she was too weak. "Don't try to move yet," Tom told her. "You're dehydrated. How long have you been out here?" She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She looked around at the rocks, at Rex, at the empty desert stretching in every direction. The fear in her eyes was growing. "I don't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't remember." Tom felt his heart skip. She was young, maybe mid-20s, and clearly not from around here. Her clothes were too nice, too clean, despite the dirt and tears. City clothes. And she was alone in the middle of nowhere with no car, no supplies, nothing. "What's your name?" he asked. She stared at him for a long moment, and Tom could see her struggling to remember. I think it's Anna," she said finally, "but I'm not sure." Tom looked at Rex, who was sitting beside the woman with his head tilted like he was trying to understand what was happening too. This was bad, really bad. People didn't just end up in the desert with no memory of how they got there. "Okay, Anna," Tom said, though he wasn't sure that was really her name. "My name is Tom and this is Rex. We're going to get you some help." He helped her drink more water, then carefully lifted her onto his horse. She was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. Rex stayed close, watching her with worried eyes as Tom climbed up behind her. "Hold on," Tom said, wrapping one arm around her to keep her steady. "The ranch isn't far." As they rode back toward the main house, Tom's mind was racing. Who was this woman? How had she ended up alone in the desert? And why couldn't she remember anything? The questions bothered him, But what bothered him more was the feeling that something about her was familiar. He couldn't shake the sense that he had seen her before, somewhere, somehow. Rex ran alongside the horse, looking up at them every few steps like he was making sure the woman was still okay. The dog had found her, and now he seemed to think it was his job to protect her. The ranch house came into view as the sun reached its highest point in the sky. Tom could see Mrs. Henderson, the ranch owner, hanging laundry on the line behind the house. She was a kind woman in her 60s who had run the ranch since her husband died 5 years ago. If anyone would know what to do, it would be her. Mrs. Henderson, Tom called as they approached. I need to use your phone. I found someone who needs help. The older woman dropped the sheet she was hanging and hurried over. When she saw the woman in Tom's arms, her face filled with concern. Oh my goodness, she said. What happened? Rex found her out by the rocks, Tom explained as he carefully helped the woman down from the horse. She's dehydrated and doesn't remember how she got there. Mrs. Henderson took one look at the woman's condition and pointed toward the house. Bring her inside. I'll call Doc Martinez right away. As Tom carried the mysterious woman toward the ranch house, with Rex following close behind, he couldn't help but wonder if this chance encounter was going to change everything. Something told him that finding her was just the beginning of a much bigger story. Doc Martinez arrived at the ranch within 30 minutes of Mrs. Henderson's phone call. He was a small, gentle man who had been taking care of people in this rural area for over 20 years. He carried his medical bag into the guest bedroom where Tom had carefully placed the woman on the bed. She was unconscious when we found her, Tom explained, standing in the doorway with Rex beside him. Severe dehydration, I think. She's been drinking water, but she seems really confused. Doc Martinez nodded and began his examination. He checked her pulse, looked at her eyes with a small flashlight, and listened to her heart. The woman lay still, watching him with those green eyes that seemed to hold secrets she couldn't remember. You're right about the dehydration, the doctor said as he worked. Her body temperature is still too high and her blood pressure is low. But the good news is I think she'll be okay with rest and fluids. Mrs. Henderson brought in a pitcher of cool water and some clean towels. Poor thing, she murmured. She looks like she's been through something terrible. After Doc Martinez finished his examination, he sat in the chair beside the bed. Can you tell me your name? He asked gently. The woman closed her eyes for a moment like she was searching through fog in her mind. Anna, she said slowly. I think it's Anna, but everything else is blank. Do you remember where you're from? How you got out there in the desert? She shook her head and Tom could see tears forming in her eyes. I remember running, she whispered. I was scared. Really scared. But I can't remember why or from what. Doc Martinez exchanged a look with Mrs. Henderson. Memory loss after trauma isn't uncommon, he said. Sometimes the mind protects itself by forgetting things that are too painful to remember. It might come back gradually or it might take some time. Tom felt a strange protective feeling rise up in his chest. This woman, Anna, seemed so lost and vulnerable. What happens now? He asked. I'll need to report this to Sheriff Williams, Doc Martinez said. A young woman found alone in the desert with no memory. That's something the authorities need to know about. Someone might be looking for her. After the doctor left, Tom sat with Anna while Mrs. Henderson prepared some soup in the kitchen. Rex had refused to leave the room, positioning himself on the floor beside the bed like a furry guardian. Rex really likes you, Tom said, trying to make conversation. He's usually shy around strangers. Anna reached down and gently petted the dog's head. He saved my life, she said softly. If he hadn't found me, don't think about that, Tom said quickly. You're safe now. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know who I am. Tom wasn't sure how to answer that. There was something about her that felt familiar, like meeting an old friend after many years. But that was impossible. He would remember meeting someone like her. Everyone deserves help when they need it, he said finally. Sheriff Williams arrived just as the sun was setting. He was a tall, serious man who had known Tom since he first came to work at the ranch. He asked Anna the same questions Doc Martinez had asked, writing down her answers in a small notebook. I've checked with all the nearby towns, the sheriff said. No missing person reports that match your description. I'll expand the search to the bigger cities, but that might take a few days. Anna's hands were shaking as she held her cup of soup. What if no one is looking for me? She asked quietly. Someone always cares, Sheriff Williams said kindly. We just need to find them. But Tom noticed the sheriff's expression when he thought no one was looking. He seemed worried, like maybe this case was more complicated than a simple case of someone getting lost in the desert. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Tom sat on the front porch of the ranch house. Mrs. Henderson had insisted that Anna stay in the guest room until they could figure out what to do next. The woman needed time to recover, and she had nowhere else to go. Rex came and sat beside Tom's chair, still looking worried about their mysterious guest. "You did good today, boy," Tom said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Real good." Through the window, Tom could see the light still on in Anna's room. He wondered what she was thinking about. Lying there in a strange place with no memories to guide her, it must be terrifying to wake up in a world where you don't know your own story. Mrs. Henderson came out and sat in the chair beside him. "She's a mystery, that one," the older woman said. "But she seems like a good person. I can usually tell." "What makes you say that?" "The way she thanked me for every little thing. The way she was gentle with Rex even though she was barely conscious. And look at this." Mrs. Henderson handed Tom a small piece of paper. It was crumpled and dirty, like it had been in Anna's pocket for a while. On it was written a phone number and the words Silver Creek Ranch in neat handwriting. Tom's heart skipped a beat. She had our ranch's name? "Found it when I was cleaning her clothes," Mrs. Henderson said. "She was looking for us, Tom, but why?" Tom stared at the paper, trying to make sense of it. How could Anna have been looking for their ranch if she couldn't remember anything? And why did she have their information written down? "Maybe her memory will come back soon," he said. But even as he said it, Tom wasn't sure he wanted it to. Something about Anna felt right, like she belonged here. If her memory returned, she might leave, and for reasons he couldn't explain. That thought made him feel empty inside. That night, Tom lay in his bed in the small cabin he rented on the ranch property, staring at the ceiling. Rex was curled up on the floor beside the bed, but Tom could tell the dog wasn't really sleeping either. They were both thinking about the woman in the main house. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more investigations, and maybe some answers. But tonight Tom found himself hoping that whatever Anna was running from would stay in the past where it belonged. She was safe now, and somehow that felt like the most important thing in the world. 3 days had passed since Tom and Rex found Anna in the desert, and she was getting stronger. Her color had returned to normal, and she could walk around without getting dizzy. But her memory remained a complete blank. Sheriff Williams had expanded his search to 3 neighboring states, but no one had reported a missing person matching Anna's description. "It's like I just appeared out of nowhere," Anna said sadly as she sat on the front porch with Mrs. Henderson. "Maybe I don't have anyone looking for me." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand gently. "Nonsense, dear. Everyone has someone. We just haven't found them yet." But Mrs. Henderson was getting worried too. Anna couldn't stay in the guest room forever, and without any identification or memory of her past, she couldn't get a job or find her own place. The older woman had been running the ranch alone for 5 years, and the paperwork and bookkeeping were starting to overwhelm her. That evening, as Tom was finishing his work in the barn, Mrs. Henderson approached him with an idea. "Tom, what would you think about Anna staying here for a while longer?" she asked. "I could use help with the ranch books and the house. My arthritis is acting up and I'm getting behind on everything." Tom tried to hide his relief. The thought of Anna leaving had been bothering him more than he wanted to admit. "If you think it would help," he said casually. "I do. And maybe being around the ranch will help her memory come back. Sometimes familiar activities can trigger things." The next morning, Mrs. Henderson made the offer to Anna over breakfast. "It wouldn't be charity," she explained. "I really do need the help and you'd earn your keep. You can stay in the guest room as long as you need to." Anna's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden." "Honey, you're the opposite of a burden. Yesterday you organized my entire spice cabinet without being asked, and you fixed that wobbly table leg that's been driving me crazy for months." It was true. Even without her memories, Anna seemed to know her way around a house. She could cook, clean, and organize like someone who had been doing it all her life. But more surprising was what happened when Tom took her out to see the horses. The ranch had 12 horses, including Tom's own mare, Dusty. When Anna walked into the stable, something changed in her. Her whole posture straightened and she moved with confidence for the first time since they'd found her. "Oh," she breathed. approaching one of the horses, a gentle bay gelding named Charlie. "You're beautiful." Charlie, who was usually nervous around strangers, immediately calmed under Anna's touch. She ran her hands along his neck and spoke to him in soft, soothing tones. It was like watching someone speak a language they'd forgotten they knew. "You've been around horses before," Tom observed. "That's not something you just pick up." Anna looked surprised. "I have. It feels natural. Like coming home." Tom showed her around the rest of the ranch, and everywhere they went, Anna seemed to understand things without being taught. She knew not to approach the horses from behind. She could tell which ones were friendly and which ones needed more careful handling. And she even helped Tom fix a broken gate latch using tools like she'd done it 100 times before. "This is amazing," she said as they walked back toward the house. Rex trotted happily between them, his tail wagging. "I feel like myself for the first time since I woke up." That evening, Anna helped Mrs. Henderson with the ranch's bookkeeping. The older woman had boxes of receipts and invoices that needed to be organized and entered into the computer. Anna took to the work immediately, creating filing systems and spreadsheets that made everything easier to understand. "Where did you learn to do this?" Mrs. Henderson asked, impressed by Anna's efficiency. "I don't know," Anna replied, frowning at the computer screen, "but the numbers make sense to me. Like I've done this kind of work before." Tom watched from the kitchen doorway as Anna worked. She was wearing one of Mrs. Henderson's old shirts and a pair of jeans they'd bought in town. But somehow she made simple clothes look elegant. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had a small crease between her eyebrows as she concentrated. There was something about the way she moved, the way she held her head, that tugged at his memory. But every time he tried to grab onto the feeling, it slipped away like water through his fingers. Over the next week, Anna settled into life at the ranch like she'd always been there. She helped Mrs. Henderson with the cooking and cleaning, took care of the bookkeeping, and spent her afternoons helping Tom with the horses. She had a natural gift with the animals that amazed everyone who saw it, but Tom noticed other things too. Anna jumped every time a car drove up the long ranch road. She always positioned herself near exits when they went into town. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she got a faraway expression that was filled with sadness and fear. "She's running from something," Mrs. Henderson said quietly one evening as they watched Anna brush one of the horses. "That girl has been hurt." Tom felt that protective feeling rise up in his chest again. "Whatever it is, she's safe here." "I hope so," Mrs. Henderson said. "But you can't run from the past forever. Eventually it catches up with you." That night Tom was awakened by the sound of Rex whimpering. The dog was standing at his cabin door, looking toward the main house. Tom got dressed and followed Rex across the yard. Through Anna's bedroom window he could see her tossing and turning in bed. She was talking in her sleep, but he couldn't make out the words. Rex whined again and scratched at the front door. Tom knocked softly. "Anna, are you okay?" The talking stopped, and a moment later Anna opened the door. Her hair was messy and her eyes were wide with fear. "I had a dream," she said shakily. "Someone was chasing me. I was in a car driving as fast as I could, but I couldn't get away. It was just a dream." Tom said gently, "You're safe here." But as he looked into Anna's frightened green eyes, Tom realized that her dream might be more than just imagination. It might be her memory trying to come back. And if someone had been chasing her, if she had been running from real danger, then maybe it wasn't over yet. Maybe the past was closer than any of them realized. 2 weeks had passed since Anna's nightmare, and the dreams were getting more frequent. Almost every night Tom would hear Rex whimpering and find Anna awake, shaken by memories that came to her in pieces like a broken puzzle. "I remember white fabric," Anna told Tom one morning as they fed the horses together. "Lots of white fabric, like a dress or something, and people arguing. Angry voices." Tom noticed her hands were shaking as she filled the water buckets. "Do you remember faces, names?" Anna shook her head in frustration. "Just feelings. Fear, mostly. And the need to run." The fragment memories were starting to paint a picture, and Tom didn't like what he was seeing. Someone had hurt Anna, scared her so badly that she had fled into the desert with nothing but the clothes on her back. The thought made his jaw clench with anger. Mrs. Henderson had noticed the change in Anna, too. "She's getting more nervous," the older woman told Tom as they watched Anna work in the garden. Yesterday, when the mail truck came up the drive, she hid behind the barn until it left. It was true. Anna had become increasingly jumpy around any visitors to the ranch. When the feed delivery truck came, she disappeared into the house. When neighbors stopped by, she found excuses to stay out of sight. She was like a wild animal that had learned to fear humans, but with Tom she seemed to relax. They had fallen into a comfortable routine of working together with the horses each morning. Anna had a gift for training that amazed Tom. She could calm the most nervous horse with just her voice and gentle touch. "You should have your own ranch someday," Tom told her one afternoon as they watched a young colt she had been training respond perfectly to her commands. Anna smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Hard to plan for the future when you don't know your past. That evening, Anna was helping Mrs. Henderson sort through old magazines when she suddenly went very still. She was staring at a photograph in a ranch magazine, a picture of a bride and groom at what looked like an outdoor wedding. "Anna?" Mrs. Henderson asked gently. "What is it?" Anna's face had gone pale. "The dress," she whispered. "It's like the one in my dreams. White and long, with lace around the collar." Mrs. Henderson looked at the magazine photo. It was a simple wedding dress, nothing fancy, but Anna was staring at it like she'd seen a ghost. "I was wearing a dress like that," Anna said slowly. "I remember looking in a mirror, and I was wearing a dress just like that. But I wasn't happy. I was scared." Tom felt his heart sink. A wedding dress meant Anna might be married. She might have a husband somewhere looking for her. The thought of Anna belonging to someone else made him feel sick, even though he had no right to feel that way. "Do you remember anything else?" Mrs. Henderson asked softly. Anna closed her eyes, trying to concentrate. "There was music playing, wedding music, and someone was telling me I had to do something I didn't want to do." A man's voice, angry and demanding. She opened her eyes, and Tom could see they were filled with tears. "I think I was supposed to get married, but I ran away. That's why I was in the desert. I ran away from my own wedding." The room fell silent. Mrs. Henderson reached over and took Anna's hand. "If you ran away, there must have been a good reason. But what if I hurt people? What if my family is worried sick about me?" Tom wanted to comfort her, but he was struggling with his own emotions. If Anna was engaged or married to someone else, then the feelings he'd been developing for her were wrong. But if she had run away from her own wedding, maybe there was more to the story. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Anna in a wedding dress, scared and alone. What kind of man would make a woman so afraid that she'd rather flee into the desert than marry him? Around midnight, he heard Rex barking urgently from outside. Tom jumped up and looked out his window. A car was coming up the ranch road with its headlights off. Tom grabbed his jacket and ran outside. The car stopped about halfway up the drive, and Tom could see two figures getting out. They had flashlights and were walking toward the main house. "Hey," Tom called out. "This is private property." The men stopped and turned their flashlights toward him. Tom couldn't see their faces clearly, but something about the way they stood made him nervous. "We're looking for someone," one of them called back. A young woman, about 25, brown hair, green eyes. Tom's blood ran cold. They were describing Anna. "There's no one here like that," he lied. "You sure about that?" the second man asked. "We have reason to believe she might be hiding around here." "I said there's no one here," Tom repeated, his voice harder now. The men stood there for a long moment, their flashlight beams sweeping across the ranch buildings. Tom could feel his heart pounding. If these men were looking for Anna, and she had run away from them, then they weren't here to help her. Finally, the first man spoke again. "If you see her, you need to call us. She's sick, needs medical attention. We're her family." They handed Tom a business card and got back in their car, but they didn't leave immediately. They sat there for several more minutes like they were watching the ranch before finally driving away. Tom looked at the card under his porch light. It had a phone number, but no names, no company, just a number. Everything about the encounter felt wrong. He walked quietly to the main house and knocked softly on Anna's bedroom window. When she appeared, he could see she was wide awake and frightened. "Did you see them?" she whispered. Tom nodded. "You were watching?" "I heard the car. I've been having dreams about cars coming to take me away." Anna's voice was shaking. "They said they were family, didn't they?" "How did you know that?" "Because that's what they always say. But they're not family. They're—" Anna stopped, pressing her hand to her forehead like she was trying to force her memory to work. "Who are they, Anna?" "I don't know exactly. But I know they're dangerous, and I know that if they find me, something terrible will happen." Tom looked into her frightened green eyes and made a decision. Then we won't let them find you. But even as he said it, Tom knew it wouldn't be that simple. The men had found the ranch somehow. They knew Anna was in the area. And judging by Anna's reaction, this wasn't over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. Tomorrow, Tom would have to decide how far he was willing to go to protect a woman whose past was catching up with her faster than any of them had expected. The next morning, Anna was quiet and jumpy. She kept looking toward the road, expecting the mysterious men to return. Tom had told Mrs. Henderson about the late-night visitors, and the older woman was just as concerned as he was. "We should call Sheriff Williams," Mrs. Henderson said as they sat around the kitchen table. "No," Anna said quickly. "Please. I don't know why, but I know that would be a mistake. Those men, they seemed like the type who would have connections, ways of finding out things." Tom studied Anna's face. "You're remembering more, aren't you?" Anna nodded slowly. "Little pieces. I remember being afraid of police, of anyone in uniform. Not because they were bad, but because someone had told me they couldn't be trusted. That they would send me back." Mrs. Henderson was cleaning out her storage closet that afternoon when she found an old box of newspapers she'd been meaning to throw away. She was sorting through them when one of the headlines caught her attention. "Anna, dear, could you come here for a moment?" she called. Anna walked over and Mrs. Henderson showed her the newspaper. It was from a city about 3 hours away, dated just over 3 weeks ago. The headline read, "Local business family's daughter missing on wedding day." Below the headline was a photograph that made Anna gasp. It was her, but she looked different. Her hair was styled perfectly, she was wearing makeup, and she was smiling for the camera. But Tom could see now that the smile didn't reach her eyes. Elizabeth Hartley, 24, disappeared from her family's estate just hours before her wedding to prominent businessman Robert Kane. Anna read aloud, her voice shaking. "Miss Hartley was last seen leaving the estate in her car around 10 p.m. Police are asking anyone with information to contact them immediately." Anna sank into a chair, staring at the newspaper. "Elizabeth," she whispered. "My name is Elizabeth, not Anna." Tom looked at the photo again. Even though he'd been living with Anna, Elizabeth, for weeks, seeing her real picture in the newspaper made something click in his memory. He had seen this face before, but not in person. "I know you," he said suddenly. Elizabeth looked up at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" Tom was quiet for a moment, trying to piece together a memory that seemed impossible. "I've been getting letters," he said slowly. "For the past 6 months. Someone asking about buying horses." The letters were signed E. Hartley. Elizabeth's eyes widened. "I was writing to you?" The letters came from the city. We'd been corresponding about a horse sale, but Tom paused, remembering. The letters weren't just about business. We'd started writing about other things. Life, dreams, what we wanted for the future. Mrs. Henderson looked between them. "You two had been writing to each other?" Tom nodded, his mind racing. "The last letter I got was about 3 weeks ago. You said you were going through a difficult time and might not be able to come see the horses after all." Elizabeth pressed her hands to her temples. "I remember now. I remember writing to you. You were the only person I could talk to honestly about what I was feeling. In my letters to you, I could be myself." The pieces were starting to fall into place. Elizabeth had been corresponding with Tom while planning a wedding she didn't want. She had been telling him about her dreams of having her own ranch, her love of horses, her desire for a simple life away from the city. "Why were you marrying this Robert Kane if you didn't want to?" Mrs. Henderson asked gently. Elizabeth closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were full of pain. "My father's business was failing. Robert offered to save it, but only if I married him. He said it would unite our family's companies and solve all our financial problems. And you didn't want to marry him? Robert is difficult, controlling. He wanted a wife who would look good at parties and never question his decisions. But I wanted something different. I wanted a life like the one you described in your letters, Tom. Working with horses, living simply, being with someone who understood me." Tom felt his heart racing. "You were coming here. That's why you had our ranch's address." "I was going to leave after the wedding," Elizabeth said quietly. "I thought I could go through with it, but then the wedding day came and I couldn't do it. I got in my car and drove toward your ranch instead. I thought maybe if I could meet you in person, if you were really the man you seemed to be in your letters." "What happened? How did you end up in the desert?" Elizabeth's face darkened. "My car broke down about 20 miles from here. I was walking trying to reach your ranch, but I got turned around in the dark. I must have been walking for hours before I collapsed." Mrs. Henderson shook her head in amazement. "So you were coming here all along?" "Those men last night," Tom said. "They were from your father or this Robert Kane?" Elizabeth nodded. "Probably both. Robert doesn't like to lose things he considers his. And my father. He needs this marriage to save his business." Tom looked at the newspaper photo again. In it, Elizabeth was standing next to a man in an expensive suit. He was older, maybe in his 40s, with cold eyes and a possessive hand on Elizabeth's shoulder. Just looking at him made Tom angry. "You don't have to go back," Tom said firmly. "You're an adult. You can make your own choices." "It's not that simple," Elizabeth said sadly. "If I don't marry Robert, my father will lose everything. His business, his house, everything my family has worked for." "That's not your responsibility," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "A father doesn't sacrifice his daughter's happiness for money." But Tom could see the conflict in Elizabeth's eyes. She was torn between her own happiness and her family's welfare. And now that her past had caught up with her, she was going to have to make a choice. "There's something else," Elizabeth said quietly. "In your letters, you mentioned wanting to meet someone who shared your love of ranch life. Someone who could be a real partner, not just a wife who looked good in photos." Tom nodded, remembering his own words. "I fell in love with the man who wrote those letters," Elizabeth said, looking directly at him. "Before I ever met you in person, I was already in love with you." The room fell silent. Tom felt like his world had just shifted completely. The woman he'd been falling for was the same woman he'd been falling for through letters for months. They'd found each other twice, once through words and once through a miraculous rescue in the desert. But their reunion was about to be tested. Because somewhere out there, dangerous men were looking for Elizabeth, and they weren't going to give up easily. That evening, Tom brought Elizabeth a box he'd kept in his cabin, all the letters she'd sent him over the past 6 months. They sat together on the front porch as she read through them, her memory becoming clearer with each page. "I remember writing this one," she said, holding up a letter dated 4 months ago. "I was so frustrated with my life. You wrote back that sometimes the best adventures start when we're brave enough to change direction completely." Tom smiled. "I remember that letter. You seemed so sad, like you were trapped in a life that didn't fit you." "I was. My father had been pressuring me about Robert for months. Every day was about wedding planning for a wedding I didn't want." Elizabeth looked at another letter. "But writing to you was like having a window to a different world. A world where I could be honest about what I really wanted." They read through more letters, and Tom was amazed at how much they had shared with each other. Elizabeth had told him about her love of horses, her dream of living somewhere peaceful, and her fear that she was disappointing everyone around her. Tom had written about his quiet life on the ranch, his belief that happiness came from simple things, and his hope of finding someone who shared his values. "We were falling in love through letters," Elizabeth said wonderingly. "And neither of us realized it." "I knew," Tom admitted. "In your last letter, you sounded so scared. I wanted to drive to the city and help you, but I didn't know how." Elizabeth pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket, the same pocket where Mrs. Henderson had found the ranch's address. "I kept your last letter with me. Want to hear what you wrote?" Tom nodded, and Elizabeth began to read. "If you're feeling trapped, remember that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified. Whatever you're facing, you don't have to face it alone. There are people who will stand by you if you let them." "Those words gave me the strength to leave," Elizabeth said softly. "On my wedding day, when I was standing in that white dress feeling like I couldn't breathe, I remembered what you wrote. That's when I decided to run." Tom took her hand. "I'm glad you did." But their quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of cars coming up the ranch road. 2 black SUVs were approaching, moving fast and kicking up clouds of dust. "They're back," Elizabeth whispered, fear filling her voice. Tom stood up. "Go inside and stay with Mrs. Henderson. Don't come out no matter what happens." "Tom, be careful. These people. They're not going to just give up and leave." The SUV stopped in front of the ranch house and several men got out. Tom recognized 2 of them from the night before, but now there were more. And leading them was the man from the newspaper photo, Robert Kane. Robert was exactly what Tom had expected from Elizabeth's description. Expensive suit, cold eyes, and an attitude that said he was used to getting whatever he wanted. He walked toward the porch like he owned the place. Mr. Morrison, I presume, Robert said, his voice smooth but threatening. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't know what you're talking about, Tom replied calmly. My fiancée. Elizabeth Hartley. I know she's here, Tom crossed his arms. Like I told your men last night, there's no one here by that name. Robert smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Let me explain something to you, Cowboy. Elizabeth is confused. She's been under a lot of stress with the wedding planning and she's not thinking clearly. Her family needs her to come home. If someone is here and they don't want to go with you, that's their choice. Actually, it's not. Robert pulled out some legal documents. Elizabeth is not well. These papers give me the authority to ensure she gets the medical help she needs. Tom looked at the papers. They looked official, but something about them felt wrong. These aren't signed by any doctor I recognize. Dr. Kane is my brother, Robert said with that cold smile. Family physician. He's very concerned about Elizabeth's mental state. Tom felt anger rising in his chest. This man was trying to use fake medical documents to force Elizabeth to come with him. You can't just kidnap someone because they change their mind about marrying you. Kidnap is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as protecting someone I care about. At that moment, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway behind Tom. She looked pale but determined. Hello, Robert. Robert's face lit up with false warmth. Elizabeth, darling. Thank goodness you're safe. Your father has been worried sick. I'm sure he has, Elizabeth said dryly. Worried about his business deal. Now. You know this wedding is about more than business. It's about love. Elizabeth stepped forward and Tom could see her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. No, Robert. It was never about love. It was about you getting a wife who would never question you, and my father getting enough money to save his company. Robert's fake smile faltered. You're being dramatic, Elizabeth. Wedding nerves, that's all. Once we get you home and you've had some rest, I'm not going home, Elizabeth said firmly. And I'm not marrying you. Robert's expression turned ugly. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, your father will lose everything. His business, his house, his reputation. Is that what you want? Tom stepped protectively in front of Elizabeth. She already told you no. I think it's time for you to leave. Robert looked at Tom like he was an annoying insect. And who exactly are you? Some ranch hand who thinks he can play hero? I'm someone who cares about Elizabeth's happiness more than your business deals. How touching. Robert gestured to his men. Unfortunately, this isn't a democracy. Elizabeth is coming with us whether she wants to or not. The men started moving toward the porch, but Tom stood his ground. You take one more step and I'm calling the sheriff. Robert laughed. Go ahead. Sheriff Williams is a reasonable man. He'll understand that we're just trying to help a confused young woman get the medical attention she needs. Tom realized with growing dread that Robert had probably already spoken to the sheriff. These people had money and influence, and they weren't going to let something like the law stop them from getting what they wanted. But before anyone could move, Rex came running around the corner of the house, barking fiercely. The brave little dog positioned himself between the men and the porch, his fur standing up and his teeth bared, and behind Rex came Mrs. Henderson, carrying her husband's old hunting rifle. I believe these folks were just leaving, the older woman said calmly, but the rifle was pointed directly at Robert. Robert raised his hands, but his expression was more annoyed than afraid. Ma'am, you don't want to do anything foolish. We're just here to help. The only help you can give is to get off my property, Mrs. Henderson replied. Now. For a long moment, everyone stood frozen. Then Robert smiled that cold smile again. This isn't over, he said to Elizabeth. You can hide here for now, but eventually you'll have to face reality. Your father needs this marriage, and you're going to give it to him. As the men got back in their SUVs and drove away, Tom felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Robert Kane was right about one thing: this wasn't over. He would be back, and next time he might not come alone. The next morning brought more trouble than anyone had expected. Tom was in the barn when he heard cars pulling up to the ranch house. Not just one or two, but several. When he looked outside, he saw Sheriff Williams getting out of his patrol car, followed by Robert Kane and a man Tom didn't recognize wearing an expensive suit. Tom hurried to the house, where he found Elizabeth and Mrs. Henderson waiting nervously on the porch. Rex was growling low in his throat, sensing the tension in the air. Morning, Tom, Sheriff Williams said, but his usual friendly tone was missing. I need to speak with Miss Hartley. What about? Tom asked, moving protectively closer to Elizabeth. The man in the expensive suit stepped forward. I'm James Hartley, Elizabeth's father. He looked at his daughter with a mixture of relief and anger. Elizabeth, this nonsense has gone on long enough. You're coming home. Elizabeth straightened her shoulders. Hello, Dad, I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you are, her father said firmly. Robert has been very patient, but the wedding needs to happen. Too many people are depending on it. Sheriff Williams looked uncomfortable. Elizabeth, your father has legal papers here. Documents that say you're not in your right mind to make decisions for yourself. Tom felt his blood boil. Those are fake papers signed by Robert's brother. You can't possibly believe that's legal. Actually, they are legal, Robert said smugly. Dr. Kane is a licensed psychiatrist, and he's reviewed Elizabeth's behavior over the past few months. Her refusal to go through with the wedding, her disappearance, her current refusal to come home, it all points to a mental breakdown. Elizabeth's face went pale. I'm not having a mental breakdown. I just don't want to marry a man I don't love. You see? Robert said to the sheriff. Irrational thinking. She needs professional help. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, still holding her rifle. This is ridiculous. That girl is as sane as any of us. Ma'am, you need to put that weapon down, Sheriff Williams said gently. I don't want anyone to get hurt here. Tom could see that the sheriff was caught in a difficult position. He probably knew something wasn't right, but the legal documents made it hard for him to refuse to help. Sheriff, Tom said desperately, you've known me for 10 years. Do I seem like the kind of person who would harbor someone against their will? No, Tom, you don't. But these are serious legal documents, and Miss Hartley's father is worried about her. Elizabeth's father pulled out another set of papers. There's more, Elizabeth. If you don't come home and go through with this wedding, I'll have no choice but to declare bankruptcy. The business your grandfather built will be gone. Your mother will lose the house she's lived in for 30 years. Tom saw the pain in Elizabeth's eyes. Her father was using her love for her family against her. That's not fair, Dad, she said quietly. You're asking me to sacrifice my entire life for business decisions I had nothing to do with. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love, her father replied. This marriage will save everything. Robert stepped closer to Elizabeth. It doesn't have to be terrible, darling. I can give you a good life. A house, nice things, security? What about love? Elizabeth asked. What about respect? What about having a say in my own life? Robert shrugged. Love is overrated. Stability is what matters. Tom couldn't stay quiet any longer. She doesn't want to marry you. Can't you understand that? You can't force someone to love you. Robert turned to Tom with cold eyes. And what exactly are you offering her? A life of poverty on some backwater ranch? Working with your hands for barely enough money to survive? I'm offering her a choice, Tom said firmly. The right to decide her own future. How noble, Robert said sarcastically. But choices don't pay bills or save businesses. Sheriff Williams sighed heavily. Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to come with us. These documents give your father the legal right to make decisions for your welfare. Wait, Mrs. Henderson said suddenly. Sheriff, how old is Elizabeth? 24, Sheriff Williams replied. Then she's an adult. And unless she's been declared legally incompetent by a court, her father can't make decisions for her. The sheriff looked at the papers again, frowning. These documents are not court orders, Mrs. Henderson interrupted. I may be just a ranch owner, but I know the law. You can't force an adult to go somewhere they don't want to go based on papers signed by someone's brother. Robert's face was getting red with anger. Sheriff, are you going to let these people obstruct justice? What justice? Tom asked. The justice of forcing a woman to marry someone she doesn't want to marry? She's my daughter, James Hartley said angrily. And she has responsibilities to her family. Her responsibility is to herself, Mrs. Henderson said firmly, and to her own happiness. Elizabeth had been quiet during this argument, but now she stepped forward. Dad, I know you're in trouble. I know the business is failing, and I know you think this marriage will fix everything. But I can't do it. You're being selfish, her father said bitterly. Maybe I am, Elizabeth replied. But I have the right to be selfish about my own life. Sheriff Williams looked at the documents one more time, then handed them back to James Hartley. I'm sorry, sir, but Mrs. Henderson is right. These aren't court orders. Your daughter is an adult, and if she doesn't want to come with you, I can't force her. Robert's face was furious. This isn't over. Elizabeth, you can hide out here for now, but eventually, you'll have to face the consequences of your choices. What consequences? Tom asked. Robert smiled that cold smile again. Your father's business will fail. Your family will lose everything. And it will all be because of your selfishness. As the men prepared to leave, James Hartley looked at his daughter one last time. I hope this cowboy is worth destroying your family for, he said bitterly. After they drove away, Elizabeth collapsed into a chair on the porch, shaking. He's right, she whispered. My family will lose everything because of me. Tom knelt beside her chair. That's not your fault. Your father made bad business decisions. You shouldn't have to pay for them with your life. But they're my family. How can I let them suffer when I could prevent it? Mrs. Henderson sat down beside Elizabeth. Honey, a real family wouldn't ask you to sacrifice your happiness for money. Love doesn't come with conditions. But Tom could see that Elizabeth was torn apart by guilt and fear. Robert and her father had planted seeds of doubt that were already growing. And he knew that this battle was far from over. 3 days after the confrontation with her father and Robert, Elizabeth was still struggling with guilt and indecision. She spent most of her time alone, walking the ranch property with Rex, who seemed to sense her troubled mood and stayed close by her side. Tom watched her from a distance, wanting to help, but not knowing how. The woman he'd fallen in love with, both through letters and in person, was slowly being crushed by the weight of her family's expectations. That evening, Mrs. Henderson called Tom and Elizabeth into the kitchen. She had been making phone calls all day and her expression was determined. I've been doing some research, she announced, spreading papers across the kitchen table. About Robert Kane and his business dealings. Elizabeth looked up with interest. What did you find? Robert Kane has been married twice before. Both marriages ended in divorce and both women cited emotional abuse and controlling behavior. Mrs. Henderson pointed to printouts from news articles. His first wife had to get a restraining order against him. Tom felt his anger rising. This is the man your father wants you to marry? There's more, Mrs. Henderson continued. His business practices are questionable too. He's currently under investigation for fraud in 2 different states. Elizabeth stared at the papers. My father knows about this? I don't think so. Robert probably kept this information hidden. But here's the really important part. His company isn't as successful as he pretends. He needs your father's business connections more than your father needs his money. Tom leaned forward. What does that mean? It means Robert has been lying to your father about how much the merger would help. Your father's business might be struggling, but it's not worthless. In fact, with the right management, it could probably recover on its own. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. So my father is trying to force me into a marriage that won't even solve his problems? That's what it looks like, Mrs. Henderson said gently. Just then they heard cars approaching the ranch again. Tom looked out the window and saw Sheriff Williams returning, but this time he was alone. Sheriff, Tom said as he opened the door. What can we do for you? Sheriff Williams looked serious but not unfriendly. I need to speak with all of you. We have a situation. They gathered in the living room and the sheriff sat down heavily. I've been doing some investigating since I was here the other day. Something about those documents didn't sit right with me. What did you find? Elizabeth asked nervously. I contacted the medical board about Dr. Kane, Robert's brother. Turns out his license was suspended 6 months ago for ethical violations. Those mental health documents he signed. They're worthless. Tom felt a surge of relief. So Robert can't force Elizabeth to go with him? Not based on those papers, no. But there's more. Sheriff Williams turned to Elizabeth. I also looked into your father's business situation. Did you know that Robert Kane has been spreading rumors about your father's company, trying to drive down its value? Elizabeth's face went pale. What do you mean? Robert has been telling potential customers and investors that your father's business is failing, convincing them to take their business elsewhere. He's been deliberately sabotaging your father's company so he could swoop in as the rescuer. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Robert hadn't just been taking advantage of James Hartley's business troubles. He'd been causing them. He wanted my father desperate enough to agree to the marriage, Elizabeth said slowly. He's been manipulating everything from the beginning, Sheriff Williams nodded. I've got enough evidence to bring charges against Robert for fraud and business interference. Your father needs to know what's been happening. Will you tell him? Elizabeth asked. I was hoping you would. He's your father, and this news should come from family. That evening, Elizabeth called her father from Mrs. Henderson's phone. Tom stayed nearby for moral support, listening to her side of the conversation. Dad, it's Elizabeth. No, I'm not calling to say I'll come home. Dad, please listen to me. I need to tell you something about Robert Kane. Tom could hear her father's voice getting louder through the phone, but Elizabeth continued calmly, explaining everything Sheriff Williams had discovered. Gradually, her father's voice became quieter. Yes, Dad, I'm sure. The sheriff has evidence. No, I'm not making this up to get out of the wedding. After 20 minutes, Elizabeth hung up the phone. She looked exhausted but relieved. He believes me? Tom asked. I think so. He's angry, but not at me anymore. He's angry at Robert for lying to him and for trying to force me into a marriage with someone so dishonest. Mrs. Henderson smiled. So the wedding is off? The wedding is definitely off. Dad said he's going to confront Robert tomorrow and end their business arrangement. What about your father's company? Tom asked. Dad thinks he can save it now that he knows what Robert was doing. It might take time, but at least he won't be working against sabotage anymore. 2 days later, Sheriff Williams returned with more news. Robert Kane has been arrested for business fraud. Turns out, once I started investigating, several other people came forward with complaints against him. He won't be bothering anyone for a while. Elizabeth felt like a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she was truly free to make her own choices. That evening, Tom found Elizabeth sitting by the horse paddock, watching the sunset. Rex was lying beside her and she was gently stroking his fur. Thinking about anything in particular? Tom asked as he sat down beside her. About how strange life is, Elizabeth said with a smile. 6 months ago, I was writing letters to a stranger about horses. 3 weeks ago, I was running away from my own wedding. And now, Elizabeth turned to look at him. Now I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly the person I want to be with. Tom felt his heart skip a beat. Even though I'm just a ranch hand who doesn't have much to offer? You have everything I want, Elizabeth said softly. Kindness, honesty, and a life that feels real. Robert could offer me expensive things, but you offer me something much more valuable. What's that? A choice. The freedom to be myself. Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. In that case, I have a question for you. Elizabeth's eyes widened as Tom got down on one knee. Elizabeth Hartley, you fell into my life in the most unexpected way possible. Rex found you in the desert, but I think maybe you found me too. Will you marry me? Not because anyone is forcing you to. Not because of business deals or family pressure, but just because we love each other. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, absolutely yes. As Tom slipped the simple ring onto her finger, Rex barked happily and wagged his tail. Mrs. Henderson appeared on the porch and started clapping. Looks like we're going to have a real wedding after all, the older woman called out. One based on love instead of business deals. 6 months later, Tom and Elizabeth were married in a simple ceremony in the field behind the ranch house. Elizabeth wore a plain white dress that she had chosen herself, and Tom wore his best jeans and a clean shirt. Rex wore a bow tie and served as the ring bearer. Elizabeth's father came to the wedding and he and Tom shook hands like old friends. James Hartley had managed to save his business, and he seemed genuinely happy to see his daughter with someone who loved her for who she was. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand, he told Elizabeth before the ceremony. I thought I was protecting you, but I was actually putting you in danger. It's okay, Dad, Elizabeth replied. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. As Tom and Elizabeth exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring, Tom couldn't help but think about the strange chain of events that had brought them together. A desperate woman fleeing from a forced marriage. A loyal dog with good instincts. A cowboy who believed in doing the right thing. And a series of letters that had connected two hearts before they ever met in person. Sometimes, Tom realized, the best love stories are the ones that begin with someone brave enough to run toward the life they really want, even when they don't know where that path will lead. As Rex barked his approval and Mrs. Henderson wiped away happy tears, Tom kissed his new wife and knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning.